Okay. Good morning. Here we are again to continue with this session. It is really a great pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Aurora Piñeiro. She is a full professor in the English department at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, UNAM, where she teaches seminars on contemporary narrative in English, including works by authors such as John Banville, Tóibín, and Anne Enright, Donoghue and Keegan. Some of her published articles on Irish writers include La partida y el retorno en Ulises de James Joyce, published in 2022, Humor and the Gods, Reshaping Traditions in the Infinities by John Banville, published in 2021, Postmodern Pastiche, The Case of Mrs Osmond by John Banville, 2020. Y en la página Codo a Codo, Somos Mucho Más que Dos, Banville y Black, Multiplicidades Autorales, published in 2019. It's very interesting because yesterday we had Cristina Elgin Martinez presenting or introducing us to John Banville, but Benjamin Black, and now it will be the double of Benjamin Black and John Banville with Aurora, who is also a specialist in his work. Another publications are Un tema y tres variaciones, El caso Albert Nobbs, published also in 2019, The Evidential Artist, A Conversation with John Banville in 2016. She contributed as a translator in the Anne Enright EFACIS Project in 2022 and in the John Banville EFACIS Project 2018. This is a project of translating different pieces and excerpts from different artists being done by Belgium at Leuven University. And these pieces are written and translated from all languages. So it's very interesting, this project too. And she was head of the PAPIME Research Project. I don't know what it is, PAPIME. Contemporary Anglo-Irish Literature, the 20th-21st century. And she is also a head of the Eavan Boland-Anne Enright Irish Chair of Irish Studies. And this is why we are very proud to have all the representatives, not only from the associations of Irish studies in Latin America, but also of the chairs of Irish studies in Latin America. And by the end of today, we are going to sign a letter of intent where we will try to establish an alliance of all the chairs in Latin America. So thank you very much, Aurora. It is really a pleasure to have you with us here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Muchas gracias. ¿Se escucha bien? Sí. Buenos días. Muchas gracias a todos, a los organizadores del Congreso, los colegas de AEIS, de ABEI, de la USAL, el cuerpo diplomático de la Embajada de Irlanda en Argentina. Todos han sido muy y muy gentiles, no solo desde que llegué aquí, sino desde antes, desde que estábamos intercambiando mensajes, planeando todo esto. Gracias a ustedes del público por estar aquí el día de hoy. Creo que hay como un falso contacto con... ¿Ahora se escucha bien? ¿Sí? Muchas gracias. Bueno, como lo anunció Laura, voy a hablar sobre la obra de Banville y ahora sí ya cambio de lengua. Authorial Multiplicities, the novels by Banville, Black, and several other twins, 2014 to 2022. John Banville's writing project has been primarily committed to a search for beauty, the articulation of what he has described as the perfect sentence, and an intention to drive prose as closely as possible to the density of poetry. In his novels, plots are reduced to a minimum while ontological concerns become central. A distinctive feature of Banville's literary agenda has been the weaving of a sophisticated literary network where texts are intimately related. It has also been vital for him to play the role of an authority in the international literary scene. This is a cosmopolitan figure acknowledged beyond the confines of his original Hiberno-English tradition, and whose artistic universe is not to be narrowed down to one single literary genre, and even less to a single variety of novel writing. The aim of this paper is to approach the novels by Irish writer John Banville, by Benjamin Black, and by several other authorial impersonations from the perspective of notions such as authorial image and authorial posture, as they have been defined by, and here I think I'm going to move a bit forward, if this thing allows me to, okay, so that you can have a look at the concepts there, some of the concepts, as they have been defined by theorists such as Jérôme Meursault and Dominique Menguenot, among others. These concepts will be complemented by Gerard Genet's distinctions between a peritext and an epitext, as this narratologist defined them in relation to thresholds of interpretation. Using this theoretical framework, my proposal will include a division of Banville's fiction into 4 main periods, not the traditional 3 ones, with a particular focus on the 4th one, which comprises novels published from 2014 to 2022. It is my contention that Banville's deliberate adoption of a complex strategy of authorial multiplicities has not only gone through different phases, but also that in each one of them, certain specific traits of his authorial identity were modeled or emphasized. The initial ones contributed to the articulation of his role as an authoritas, then to a later distancing from or unfolding of such authoritas figure, which made room for the embodiment of the dark twin motif. And in more recent times, when his authorial alter egos and impersonations have been multiplying, this abundance has become one of the ways in which he materializes the theme of alterity or alterities that haunts his fiction and even reaches beyond the borderline of his narrative world and into an extra-textual territory. My reading implies a conception of the literary communication circuit as a multi-layered system and finds one of its most transgressive aspects in the unsettling of the frontiers between intra and extra-textual realities. It also includes an exploration of varied forms of novel writing as landmarks within a paradoxical Banvillian literary scene where the aesthete, the art critic, the noir writer, the philosopher, and the iconoclast coexist in a relentless postmodern tension. First period, from responsible author to author-actor. Long-Lanking, Nightspawn, and Birchwood. This is from 1970 to 1973. Banville's literary career started with the almost simultaneous publication of Long-Lanking, his first short story collection, which John himself acknowledged as strongly influenced by Joyce, and with Nightspawn, his first novel. It was with these 2 titles that he became what Menguenot calls in his authorial figure theory, the responsible author, meaning the instance that publicly acknowledges his, her, their authorship in relation to a text or texts. This is a simple initial facet, but in Banville's case, it quickly develops into the actor-author phase, mainly due to the literary accomplishments of Birchwood. Long-Lanking and Nightspun show an early interest in Banville's writings towards both self-referentiality and metatextuality. In the case of the novel, the previous features also manifest in the form of linguistic playfulness, the presence of anagrams and riddles, while thematically, literature itself, differences between memory and the past and betrayal are preponderant. These two early works are also important because they contain the keys to the origins of Benjamin Black as Banville's future and first literary alter ego, but that aspect will be commented upon when we reach the third stage in this grouping of Banvillian works. Birchwood is Banville's third book and the one that certified him as a novelist. According to the author, this was the novel where he openly dealt with Irishness, although his is a postmodern approach which challenges historiography as a discourse associated to veracity or objectivity and explores the varied ways in which we construct the past and notions such as identity. Birchwood showcases its author as capable of acquiring literary maturity in a really short time span. Although we are still dealing with his first period, Birchwood takes Banville to the following level, that of the author-actor, as this is the moment when he achieves centrality as a public figure in the Irish literary scene, as well as among a larger English-speaking audience. It is at this stage when, according to Menguenot, the author develops into an entity, I quote, who organizes his existence around the production of literary texts. He becomes the administrator of a trajectory, a career, and it is also when diverse cliches associated to the literati may be attributed to this new type of artistic figure. From this moment onwards, the writer actively participates in the creation of an authorial figure who, in some cases, may transform into what Menguenot calls an author authoritas, which in Banville's case, does take place as soon as the second period of his career begins. Second period. From authoritas to mayor authoritas to an authorial image, 1976-1997. In 1976, Banville published the first volume of what would become the scientific tetralogy. This is 4 novels thematically centered on both the construction and the history of Western scientific discourse, as well as its similarities with the artistic one, or the role of imagination in both of them. This tetralogy, or first narrative sequence, inspired by the figures of Copernicus, Kepler, Newton, and in a more indirect fashion, Einstein, has been described by Banville himself as his European novels of ideas. In other words, the first set of novels that would position him as an author in dialogue with other distinguished European artists associated to diverse cultural backgrounds and a cosmopolitan figure who authored philosophical novels, or what we call in Spanish novelas de tesis, a prestigious subgenre with a halo of authority or superiority in relation to other novelistic subspecies. At this stage, he fully embodied the role of the writer who deliberately contributes via interviews, essays, reviews, prologues to his creative works, prologues, etc., to the construction of his author authoritas as a supranarrative that runs parallel to his creative works and that shapes him as an artist who might develop an authorial image. This is a writer who might interact with other external instances which would ratify him as endowed with authority. The scientific tetralogy, not yet. The scientific tetralogy was followed by the art trilogy, integrated by the Book of Evidence, Ghosts, and Athena. This triad deals with the themes of representation, authenticity, and authorship in the Western tradition, and although mainly centered on visual arts, it encompasses all varieties of artistic creation. With this second set of novels, Banville went all the way down the avenue of the highbrow philosophical themes of postmodern narrative and was thus anointed as a major authoritas or great author. This public and international acknowledgement was, first of all, a consequence of the extraordinary quality of his writings, but also a response to ratifications from varied external institutions and audiences, of which I will mention only three. First, the Book of Evidence was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize in 1989. Second, the positive reception among critics and readers of a post-trilogy novel, although some Banville scholars, such as Elke Döcker, consider this one the fourth book in what should then be called the art tetralogy, a novel with the title The Untouchable, which even today remains a favorite among readers who consider this one more graspable than the previous works, and with the extra seductive ingredient of its being at least partially inspired on the lives of the famous World War II Cambridge spies. This novel was the winner of the Lannan Literary Award for Fiction, and that's on that same year. Finally, and as a cherry on top of the cake, in 1997, the first book-long critical study on Banville's writings, Rudiger Imhoff's John Banville, A Critical Introduction, was published and remains an important reference for anyone into Banville's studies. Thus, institutions, general readers, and scholars alike contributed to Banville's certification as an authoritas, while the writer himself was actively working on an authorial image suitable for his new position in the literary scene. According to Mengenot, the clearly acknowledged major authoritas is the only one who may have the possibility of developing an authorial image, defined as a concept, and I quote, which is not restricted neither to the person who produces the text nor to its audience. It constitutes an unstable reality because it is the product of an interaction among heterogeneous interventors, end quote. This time, we're talking about a concept where the intratextual and extratextual get juxtaposed. In a different article published in 2013, Mengenot insists on the idea that although the writer takes part in the construction of the authorial image, this image is the product of, I quote again, an interaction between the author and the different audiences that produce discourses about such author, critics, scholars, general readers, etc. For these theories, in an authorial image, two activation zones may be identified. The zone concerning the text itself, and another one which has to do with the actor/public persona, whose behavior is grounded in, but also exerts an influence upon, the collective representations of what is associated to a regular writer's activity in a given time, in a given place and time. For Mengenot, it is important to underscore that the writer is not in complete control of his authorial image, because this image gets articulated, on the one hand, in a confluence of his words and public gestures, and on the other hand, the words of all those who, in varied ways and according to their own interests, contribute to the modeling of such image. In Banville's case, his second production period, which runs from 1976 to 1997, about 21 years of a literary life, culminates with the crystallization of an intersectional authorial image that consolidated him as a philosopher of language and the incurable aesthete, as an erudite and solemn author of difficult novels, many of them imbued with dark atmospheres that associated some of his writings to postmodern Gothic. This is also an authorial image where the apparent likeness or closeness between the main narrative voices in his works, usually male, erudite, and despotic first-person narrators, combined with Banville's radical or iconoclastic statements about the works by other writers, his detachment from an Irish literary tradition in favor of a European one, his rejection of the role of the writer as the spokesperson of a nation, all these elements derived from an extra-textual context and fueled by interviews and other public discourses contributed to his image as an arrogant figure. This way, his authorial image became a paradoxical one of both enshrinement and repudiation, linked to the textual sphere, but also overflowing it. Third period, the Authorial Posture, 2000 to 2013. A new and third period in Banville's career started with the publication of the novel Eclipse, which you have here on the slide, and ended with Holy Orders in 2013 by Benjamin Black, which is the one you talked about yesterday. This period is characterized by diversity and multiplicity. Many of the features associated to the two previous stages persist in Banville's writings, but in this new trilogy, known as the Alexander and Cascliff trilogy, Eclipse, Shroud, and Ancient Light, the poetic prose is even more pervading, and the oniric elements become a sort of mist that permeates every level of these narrative worlds. Interspersed with the production of this trilogy, we find two extraordinary novels written in contrasting tones, The Sea and The Infinities. The Sea was awarded the Man Booker Prize and thus became another ratification of Banville as a major authoritas. From 2005 on, his books were translated into a large number of languages. Several important monographies on his writings appeared on the academic scene, and Trinity College Dublin bought Banville's manuscripts, at least those from 1968 to 1988, and integrated them into its document archive. And it is right after this climatic moment or success peak that Benjamin Black is born. Benjamin Black is a writer of crime fiction who has published 12 novels, 8 of which compose the Quirk's series, which means that the protagonist is Dr. Quirk, a forensic pathologist at the Holy Trinity Hospital in Dublin. Quirk is also an amateur detective, and together with his friend Inspector Hackett, they become a peculiar reformulation of the Holmes-Watson pair in the context of Dublin in the 50s. These novels are characterized by a fluid prose, careful suspense construction, and an atmospheric density that is constitutive of the best examples of noir writing. Benjamin Black is the first one of Banville's alter egos. And there you have it, like getting in the middle of the other ones. Is the first one of, I lost my line. I found it. Benjamin Black is the first one of Banville's alter egos, an instance that exhibits the artificiality in every layer or variety of the author notion. As I mentioned at an earlier stage in this paper, the textual origins of Benjamin Black are in the first 2 books by Banville. They may be traced back to the character of the nameless boy in Summer Voices, which gets extended to the figure of Ben in Island, and which becomes Ben White in The Possessed, a novel that was left out of the collection in 1984, in the 1984 reprinting of Long Lanking. After that, Benjamin White became the protagonist of Nightspun, where he's a young Irish writer who is suffering from a writer's block and gets involved in a political intrigue that forces him to witness the death of a man whose last name was Black, someone he was supposed to meet with. The scene is so full of specular effects that when White gets close to dead Black, this produces an exchange of identities, and thus Benjamin Black is born. And in this third period in Banville's production, an ontological displacement occurs. Black, the character inside a novel, becomes Black, a character outside a novel. And not only that. Black is a responsible author. Banville provides with a corpus as well as an embodiment. This last aspect gets literalized to the point that Black is able to exist as an author-actor. This is a strategy that goes beyond the use of a pseudonym to become a literary and literalized heteronym phenomenon. Black has published other noir novels beyond the Kirk series, has his own official author's web page, which was designed with an aesthetics and contents completely different to those in the Banville web page. And I'd like to show you that one. I'm going to move. These two photos come from the official Banville web page, and this one comes from the Benjamin Black web page, as well as these ones. So you immediately notice the difference in aesthetics and the spirit of these pages. I'll move backwards, then we'll have a look at them again. The Black authorial figure acquired such an autonomy that he gets invited to crime fiction writers' gatherings, events where Banville, now between inverted comma, adopts an attire, body, and verbal language different to those associated to his original or orthonym figure. This is to say that Banville impersonates Black, and this becomes part of an authorial performance that several theorists call authorial posture. According to Meso, an authorial posture is a presentation of the self an author performs in both his discourse and his public literary behavior. It is related to the etymology of persona. This is personare, that through which one communicates and also institutes a voice and its location or deixis of social intelligibility. The authorial posture is a type of image that a writer constructs throughout time and in an accumulative fashion. For Aina Perez and Mary Torras, the authorial posture, I quote, articulates both an internal and an external perspective linked to a presentation of the self, usually spectacularized, in the contexts where a given person embodies the author function, end quote. The association with the notion of a spectacle is a crucial one here. The writer, as we have discussed before, is not in full control of his authorial image, but it is in this dimension called authorial posture where he attempts to control or redirect the presentations of his self, constructed via media stagings, which include photographic and other audiovisual representations, interviews, and more. This becomes one of the manifestations of the technologies of celebrity. The authorial figure known as Benjamin Black expands John Banville's authorial posture as it incorporates a ludic approach to the concept of unstable identities. It provides it with a twin creative figure who brings with him a different literary lineage, which is also made public as a way to orient and condition a perspective from which to read Banville's novels. His fiction descends from that of Georges Simenon, especially the Roman Dur, such as The Snow Was Dirty, Monsieur Mont Vanishes, and Tropic Moon. As Black himself explains it in one of the tabs in his official web page, Benjamin Black's World. In fact, in that tab includes the transcription of an interview with Black by Banville, one more way in which Banville actively participates in the creation of Black as another with different verbal and bodily languages. There are many fascinating identity duplications and duplicities in this specific audiovisual material, but I will only mention one example used to create a verisimilitude in terms of the supposedly drastic differences between both authors. Black, always wearing a black coat or Macintosh and a black fedora, is represented as a figure in movement, a moving target, which coincides with the stereotype of the hard-boiled detective. In contrast to that representation, in either interviews or videos like the ones included in John Banville's official website, Banville is always a static figure with a glance that denotes concentration and solemnity. There are many strategies of both closeness and detachment in the varied facets of interplay between these two figures, but all of them reinforce an ontological notion of the self as multiple and unstable. Fourth period, the Authorial Labyrinth. This is the most recent novels from 2014 to 2022. Some of the Quirk novel series published between 2014 included narrative segments taking place in America, Boston in particular, but there is no doubt they positioned the Dublin of the 50s as their central literary geography. However, the Limmer, which was previously serialized in the New York Times and finally published as a one-volume novel in 2008, does not belong to the Quirk series and has New York City as its main setting. This is an accomplished noir fiction where the influence of Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler as the American masters who gave the hard-boiled detective figure its most outstanding features may be identified. But The Limmer is also a very Black/Banville novel where the art of writing is a central theme and the figure of John Glass becomes a quite transparent authorial representation within the text. The closing lines of the novel are uttered by a female character who addresses Glass in the following way, I quote, "You have to decide what to do. You have your," she laughed shortly, "your story." She looked at him with compassion, almost. "It's up to you, John," she said. "I'm sorry, but it's up to you," end quote. And thus, John, this is John Banville, or Benjamin Black, went for it and did not only launch The Limmer, but 6 years later, as Black, he fully embodied the Chandler figure and published a Philip Marlowe novel as if it had been written by Chandler himself, an authorial impersonation that transformed the Banville-Black binary into a larger creative entity, an artistic tribe or clan within which family members keep being born or transfigured into similar but not identical figures, or adopting new persona or overlapping identities in both intra and extra-textual spheres. This was the beginning of a new level of complexity in an ambitious authorial labyrinth that goes beyond the other varieties mentioned before: the responsible author, the actor author, the authoritas author, the authorial image, and the authorial posture, and which from now on I will refer to, and here is my acronym, as the multiple authorial John Banville figure, or the Mayobaf as my acronym for the clan. In The Black-Eyed Blonde, a Philip Marlowe novel, Benjamin Black took after Chandler, and I quote, played fast and loose with the topography of Southern California, end quote, as the writer himself states in the author's note that follows the novel. It is also in this paratextual page where he mentions that in his files, Chandler kept a list of possible titles for future books, and the Black-Eyed Blonde was among them, thus reinforcing the idea that this new novel is in fact a book Chandler himself wished he would have written. Apart from the evident legitimization strategy in this reference, an extra authorial game is deployed in this paratextual note when, by the end of the page, the writer includes an acknowledgement which reads, I quote, finally, warm thanks to my brother, Vincent Banville, who introduced me to Marlowe, end quote, thus overlapping the Chandler/Black/Banville authorial identities, as indeed the extra-textual John Banville does have a brother of such name who also happens to write crime novels. And there are intertextualities with those crime novels. So this is an endless thing. I'm getting there. But The Black-Eyed Blonde not only asserts its lineage as a Philip Marlowe novel via the author's note, but also proves to be an extraordinary example of literary ventriloquism or pastiche, as it emulates Chandler's style with an elegant prose where the syntax is never allowed to become too intricate, with the presence of original but not obscure similes, by a discreet use of intertextual references to highbrow art, which are carefully brought down to earth by characters who remember the lines but have no idea who the artist behind the reference is, or the artist's name is wrongly recalled, or the reference is completed by a secondary character whose learning had been understated by characters and readers alike. I'm going to take a section out. But Black's achievements in terms of his Chandler impersonation were not enough for the Mayobaf clan. Another outstanding authorial identity was to join the family in 2017, when Banville published Mrs. Osmond, a new and even more ambitious project where he impersonates Henry James and chooses to do so with a work that is not only a pastiche of the Jamesian prose, but also a sequel to one of his most famous writings, the Portrait of a Lady. In my opinion, this has been so far Banville's most intrepid and fully achieved authorial unfolding. And here I'm jumping again, I'm sorry, but I have to, I'm running out of time. Well, then we have other both Black and Banville novels in between, but I want to get to two more examples, which are, two of them are non-fiction books. Timepieces, a Dublin memoir, yes, you have it here in the slide, which was published in 2016, was Banville's second non-fiction book, which establishes an enticing dialogue with Prague Pictures, Portraits of a City, which had been published in 2003. As both are hybrid pieces where the conventions of psychogeography, travel literature, and something close to memoir writing overlap with dissertations on the varied and inevitable forms of mediation in art, as well as a defense of artistic mediation as the only way to apprehend possible realities. Although the two books are written using a first-person voice, which identifies as John Banville, a name which coincides with that on the front covers of both volumes, these mature and young Banville figures are, one more time, authorial representations of artistic characters seduced by cityscapes as enigmas and obsessed with the pertinence or lack of pertinence of the concept of authenticity in relation to art, with a particular emphasis on literature and photography as their main examples. Here again, I am omitting several pages because I want to get to the final part. These are some of the most recent novels. And one of the interesting things about the one you have on your left side, yes, is that now instead of being signed by Benjamin Black, this one, The Secret Guests, was signed by B.W. Black, which may be interpreted in several ways, but I'm only going to summarize two of them. One of the possibilities is that W might stand for William John Banville, complete name, or if he is closing the circle and going back to the origins of Benjamin Black before making it disappear, then it is Benjamin White Black, one of the beginning of his first two books. And right after he somehow pays tribute to this Benjamin White Black, the following book, which is in fact a continuation of this new saga or series, which has a new detective as their protagonist, is appeared with the title Snow and signed for the first time by John Banville as a noir fiction writer. And of course, the title is connected to Georges Simenon's famous novel, The Snow is Dirty. Again, I am omitting several things here, and I'm going straight to the conclusions, which are condemned to be provisional conclusions because these things keep reproducing. Banville has announced that next month, on October the 25th, a new John Banville novel will be published with the title The Singularities, which is a sequel to The Infinities. So the game goes on. So whatever I decide to say today, I know I will have to correct it after October 25th. So provisional conclusions. The authorial multiplicities in the Banville, Black, Hiberno, Chandler, James, Simenon et al. Labyrinth, characterized by the tensions associated to paradoxes, do take place in a particular historical and ideological Banvillian context. It is after 2005, when Banville has already been awarded the Booker Prize and thus ratified as a major authoritas, that he gives himself permission to create the Black figure. At that stage, there was no way he was not going to be considered a serious or canonical author. Another reason for this multiplicity that starts with Black but does not end there is that Banville may have created Black as escape from the authoritas in at least two possible ways. On the one hand, as a form of transgression against the notion of canon. On the other hand, as a relief from the tension, the permanent effort of being John Banville, a figure characterized by severity, seriousness, the deconstruction philosopher, or the aesthete in search for the perfect sentence he knows he will never find. In contrast to that, Black is proud of his novels, which he can write at a really good speed and where there is no need of an endless erudition. A third and particularly important reason for the unfolding of authorial identities is the way it makes possible the quest and concretion of several narrative and philosophical holy grails for Banville. The first one of them is the embodiment of the dark twin figure. Depending on the novel, it is called the lost twin, the mute twin, the dead twin, the imagined twin, etc. That is omnipresent in Banville's narrative. In the figure of Benjamin Black, this obsession is radically materialized. If, according to Banville, the purpose of literature is, and I quote, to place in the world an object that did not exist before, end quote, then in the Black figure, the power of words to create worlds gets literalized. But this does not nullify the intensities of the paradoxical. Banville and Black are two, and at the same time, only one. Banville and Black are two, and at the same time, they are legion. If the obsession with the dark twin might seem to reveal a preference for the notion of duality, this duality suffers a displacement towards multiplicity. And I quote Banville's words, "We are a myriad selves," says Banville in another interview, and in his writings where apparent dualities are always deconstructed into multiplicities, or at least an element of irregularity is incorporated into the story in such a way that the narrative voice or authorial figure makes sure there is at least one unfolding and an element of asymmetry. Yes, I think I can read it. It's just one more paragraph. Another interesting aspect of the Benjamin Black novels is that they become a vehicle for a reappropriation of doubling as a literary geography. And this is done from a novelistic subgenre and a place of utterance so different to that of Joyce that a comparison would be impertinent. The Kirk series is a clever solution which makes it possible to maintain a certain unhomeliness as a necessary distance for artistic creation, and at the same time, a recovery of an urban literary space, and also to what some critics had perceived as a troubled relationship with an Irish literary or otherwise sense of identity. The reading presented in this paper implies a larger conception of literary communication and finds its most transgressive moment in a destabilizing of the borderline between the intra and the extra-textual. The Banville Black case provides us with elements to think about authorship as a heterogeneous textual lattice, which critics have defined as the product of the writing and of the diverse collective processes inherent in literature, if we conceive it as an identity and also institutional and communicative dispositive. The game of mobile or porous borderlines, the participation of diverse instances, and the joy found in the abundance of the varied unfoldings evokes the image of a textual labyrinth and somehow a garden of forking paths. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurora, for your lecture. Really, you divided, you cover the whole work of John Banville, more than 50
Only
years
31 novels
of his work. And then the way you divided the different authorial impersonations that Banville presents throughout his work is really playing games constantly with these multiplicities. And I think that despite his playing games with his readers, he is trying to present this idea of the inner self and the multiplicity of the inner selves in all human beings. So I think that in a way, despite being John Banville or Benjamin Black, he is constantly trying to bring us into our own inner lives and worlds. So I do not know if we have just one or two questions or comments, and then we close. Yes, I know that you would.
Bueno, antes que nada felicitarte porque es la introducción más completa que he leído o escuchado a Banville, ¿no? Y a Benjamin Black. Ahora, hay un punto, por ejemplo, yo creo que en el caso de la rubia de ojos negros, hay una explicación, yo encontré una explicación más simple, que realmente los herederos de Chandler le ofrecieron una suma importante para que intentar continuar con la serie Chandler. Por supuesto que para todo escritor de novela policial, Chandler es un hito, pero creo que en ese caso hubo factores sí, extraliterarios, ese sería el punto, gracias, que son para mí los más importantes. Y él mismo en algún momento dijo que no continuaba porque yo creo que no se sintió cómodo en ese rol. Por eso no lo relacionaría con Mrs. Osmond, la continuación de The Portrait of a Lady, que eso yo ahí lo ubicaría dentro de este libro de Genet, que para mí es el más completo, Palimpsest, ¿no? Que estudia todas las posibilidades de intertextualidad. Bueno, es una continuación, como ha habido tantas continuaciones, o pensemos en la famosa precuela White's El amplio mar de los sargazos, ¿no es cierto?, a la obra del siglo XIX, sí, Jane Eyre, por supuesto. O sea que yo no los relacionaría. Para mí, allí, en el caso de Mrs. Osmond, es una decisión de Banville. En el caso de la rubia de ojos negros, bueno, es Benjamin Black, que bueno, se siente tentado, porque no, ha sido uno de sus maestros, digamos, del policial, como de todos los autores del policial, pero creo que ha habido razones extraliterarias, no como en el caso de Mrs. Osmond, que fue una decisión totalmente libre. Pero bueno, esa es mi aproximación. Pero bueno, excelente realmente.
Muchas gracias por el comentario. Yo totalmente de acuerdo. Si hubo dinero de por medio, pues qué bueno que le paguen, ¿no? Pero sí creo que la parte en la que son comparables es que no solo hay influencia sino este ejercicio de pastiche, de adoptar la sintaxis, el vocabulario, los ritmos de la obra del otro autor, que no es algo que haga necesariamente en todas las demás novelas, ¿no? Sí. Y logrado.
Volvía, lo digo porque tiene que ver, volvía de Río de Janeiro, no sé si hay alguien más había huelgas de aviones en la Argentina, logramos salir de Río de Janeiro, pero me quedé varada en Buenos Aires. La compré en el Ateneo y para la noche ya la tenía terminada. Y bueno, por supuesto que cualquier obra policial la podés terminar en un día, pero yo creo que era absolutamente necesario que adoptara el estilo de Chandler, porque eventualmente esto podría haber continuado, ¿no? Uh-huh. La idea era que pudiera haber una continuación de la obra de Chandler, pero por supuesto son puntos de vista. No, habría también, que preguntárselo a él.
Sí, también es muy interesante que en los dos casos, la novela en la que encarna Chandler y en la que encarna Henry James, las de Banville también tienen un final lo suficientemente abierto para que él o alguien más continúe. Y entonces, bueno, ahí está la invitación, ¿no? A ver si alguien más la toma. Gracias.
Estamos en el final ya, porque tenemos más otras actividades, entonces por favor vamos a agradecer todos juntos a Aurora por esta excelente conferencia.